we just started. Atëherë më mbrëma miq, evening everyone. I'm so glad to be here tonight with Dan, and but first of all, I just want to welcome all of those that were able to attend tonight, and thankfully we are able to record the session tonight, and we're going to have it available for you guys later as you come through. My name is Elvis Plaku, pra unë quhem Elvis Plaku, dhe kjo është një webinar faktikisht. This is a webinar in a line of webinars that we do at Sipas Biznesi. Pra ne bëjmë një seri webinars në Sipas Biznesi dhe vazhdimisht kemi të ftuar të ndryshëm që flasin për tematika të caktuara. I'm switching to Albanian and English intentionally so I can help Dan as well to follow up. And te Sipas Biznesi ne ofrojmë këshilla praktike dhe kurse dhe trajnime për biznesin. So at Sipas Biznesi we offer, advice, articles, trainings, and different resources available to professionals, entrepreneurs. Kështu që dhe ky webinar sonte është në linjë me ato tematika dhe gjëra që ne trajtojmë vazhdimisht si pjesë e aktiviteteve. Unë duhet mirëpres secilin për ju që po bashkoheni dhe tani, Ilirin, Dorianin, Edlirën, falenderoj që u bashkohej që në fillim. Nëse keni mundësi dhe if you can just send us a hi in the chat. Thjesht të sigurohemi që na dëgjoni. So if you guys hear us, just say hi in the chat. I would love to see that. Awesome. Okay. Nëse keni mundësi, do ju kërkoja që t'i bëni mute mikrofonit, nëse jeni në rrugë ose në kafe diku, pra shpresoj na dëgjoni okay. Thjesht do ju kërkoja që t'i bëni. Përshëndetje Dorianit edhe Ilirit për në chat. Okay, great. So I'm going to do the, as I said, my name is Elvis Plaku. I'm the founder of Sipas Biznesi, which is a website. It's actually a business, entrepreneurial business. And on Sipas Biznesi, per se, we do the articles and the resources and the training. Tonight, we have Dan Biles. And I'm going to, if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to read his bio because I think I want to be faithful. And I'm going to read it in Albanian. Dan Biles ka udhehequr organizatat cilat ka fituar çmime kombëtare gjatë karrierës së tij. Ai ka komanduar njësi ushtarake që kanë fituar disa herë çmimin Best of the Best, pra më i mirë më të mirëve. Si vendimarrës kryesor i një firme inxhinierike civile, ai ka arritur performancën e asaj firme në 75% të tregut në rajonin e saj. Pra ka arritur të kapë 75% të tregut në rajonin ku ajo firmë operon. Gjithashtu ai ka drejtuar një qark, pra një rreth, qarku e Elbasanit në shtetin e Floridës. Dhe ky qark në drejtimin e tij ka fituar 3 çmime, ku një prej tyre ishte vendi më i mirë për punuar. Pra fal punës së Denit, vet vendi i tij punës ka fituar çmime të tilla. Deni dhe gruaja e tij, Mendi, janë transferuar në Shqipëri që në tetor të vitit 2022. Përpara se të vinë në Shqipëri, Den ishte drejtues i bashkisë të qarkut në Florida, në Shtetet e Bashkuara, dhe nga ky pozicion ai është tashmë shkëputur dhe ka ardhur që të punojë dhe të jetojë këtu në Shqipëri. Në punën e tij të fundit, ai ishte përgjegjës për funksionimin e më shumë se 60 departamenteve dhe divizioneve të ndryshme me rreth 3500 punonjës. Qarku ofronte shërbime komunale, pra bashkiake, për mbi 600.000 banor me një buxhet prej rreth $2 miliardë në vit. Përpara kësaj detyre, Den kishte zënë pozicionet e tjera në administratën vendore, ishte drejtues një firme konsulencë inxhinierike, karrierën e tij e nisi në forcat ajrore të Shteteve të Bashkuara, nga ku dhe doli në pension si kolonel pas 25 vite shërbim në Gardën Kombëtare Ajrore të SBA-s. Den ka mbaruar studimet në Universitetin e AVM të Texasit, duke fituar një bachelor në shkencat e inxhinierisë, një master në inxhinierinë civile. So, Dan, I did the Albanian part of introducing you, and hopefully you picked up on something, and I stayed faithful to everything that you've achieved. Again, I want to remind you guys, we are recording this tonight. I want to go straight to Dan, and I want to welcome Dan again and thank him wholeheartedly for being available and joining us tonight. Dan, the stage is yours. We're eager to hear what you have to say. So thank you again.
Well, Shum Falmander per present team. Thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. And it's a joy and a pleasure to be able to share some of my experiences and some of my thoughts and about leadership and the impact leadership can have on people's lives and companies' lives. So with that, I'm going to start with sharing my screen. And we will get to the PowerPoint. So I want to start a little bit about my leadership journey that kind of isn't in the standard bio. I started learning about leadership when I was growing up, kind of watching my dad lead churches in Southeast Texas, around the Houston area, and watching how he led those various organizations over time. And I took that in how he really built his leadership philosophy and principles on the Bible, the Christian Bible that was written, 2,000 years ago. And so I took those principles that I watched him use, and as I went through college and in the military and then private business, and then finally local government, tested those theories against what I saw in the real world, if you will, and then what research said and what all the science says behind leadership. And come to find out, over the 30 to 40 years of experience kind of watching that and testing that and trying things out, the research and the data and the experience all goes back to those base principles that he led those churches with are the foundation and really generate great performance in organizations, whether they be religious organizations or government organizations or military organizations or a business organization. And so I want to talk a little bit about that tonight and some of the stories behind that and the science behind and the data behind that. And so with that, I kind of have a value proposition for you. I believe that great organizations are ones that create a place in which people willingly invest themselves fully in the work of the organization. And I'll tell you that we found that to be true at the county that I just left last year, almost about this time. And there's a way we did that and got to that. And so when I got to the county in 2017, Pasco County, which is just north of Tampa, Florida, it was an organization that had a very poor culture, very hierarchical. Decisions were made at the highest levels, and nobody had the ability to kind of do what they needed to do to get the job done. Everybody's hands were kind of tied to that. And so when I walked in, that's kind of what I faced. And so as a team, we built a leadership philosophy around those three words you see at the top: people, purpose, and performance. And use that, we put our people first, connected them to their purpose, and then watch them perform, to where we built a great organization and turned around a team that was, losing, 20% of the employee turnover every year, very poor employee satisfaction and employee engagement. Turned that around, that in 2021 and 2022, over a period of about 12 months, the county won 4 national awards for being the best place to work, a top workplace, and you can see the trophies and the little ribbon on the slide. And that was done by focusing on the culture and the core values and really connecting with the people. And so I want to walk through really some of the foundational values and aspects of that tonight. The whole story takes a lot longer, but I want to walk through just some basic building blocks tonight with that, so you can have that and at least start thinking about how to apply that in your life and how you lead organizations or people. So first, really got to start with, what is leadership? You can fill libraries with books published on leadership and what people think leadership is, but ultimately I think it boils down to 2 pretty simple definitions. And this is important because it impacts how we lead and how we do things. And so first, John Maxwell's definition that he has is probably the simplest and the cleanest that I've seen. And it's leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so when you are in an organization, you can actually be a leader in the organization or in a group without actually being the boss, not actually being the supervisor, because you're the one with influence. You're the one that kind of guides that. You're the one people look to for ideas and information. And so we at the county, we took that approach and made sure we built a leadership development program that spanned the entire length of the organization, from the very brand new employees all the way through the top executives. We were training and building our leadership depth. The second one is from the U.S. Army, and they add a little bit to it, but I think it refines it a bit to really help us in business when we're trying to run organizations, operations in a business environment. It's leadership is influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation while operating to accomplish the mission and improving the organization. And so again, everyone's a leader. Part of my experience in the military was that the military, the United States military, builds leadership development training at all levels in the organization, from the very basic recruit all the way to the top levels. As I retired as a colonel, I was still in a band that had professional military organization leadership development program for that band. And so as an organization, we were committed to building leaders throughout that. And we took the same approach at the county, and I've seen the same approach taken at private businesses where they build leadership depth to the organization. The other key there is it touches on purpose. And I think leaders need to realize that purpose is important to people. We all have a purpose, and in a purpose, what drives us? Why do we get up every morning? Why do we do what we do? And so part of really engaging that is connecting people's purpose with the work they're doing and how that impacts the purpose and mission of the organization, which then gets you back to the impact you have on the community and the world around you. And you can do that from the entry bank teller and how the work that they do provides the ability to have funds for the community and for people to be able to own and build and rent their own houses or places to live, or however, or to take out a loan to be able to open a business that then improves the community, because now you have economic development, economic potential. Even the very basic, the very frontline worker, you can do that with. And so those two aspects of leadership really are important. As my job was as a CEO of an organization or a leader of a team, was to develop the leadership potential in the people and then utilize that to maintain and build the culture the organization wanted. And culture gets back to that's how you operate, regardless of what the standard operating procedures are. The culture is a pattern of behaviors and beliefs the organization, is what it does. Usually those aren't written down. They're just the knowns in the things that people assume in the way behavior acts. And so we wanted to make sure we impacted the culture, and you do that through good leadership. Kim Blanchard, the writer, talks about leadership a lot, and he said that at the end of the day, everything rises and falls on leadership or the leader. And so you have to understand that, and the best way to impact that is by developing leaders who then help you build your culture in the organization. So that's leadership, and that's the definition, and that's how you want to make sure you approach it in an organization. And so we're going to go on to some of the basic building blocks that I think are key and critical to being a leader of impact, a high valued leader that makes an impact in an organization, that makes an impact in a community, that makes an impact, to a certain extent in a nation and a country. Because I think as leaders, we all can, whether we think so or not, our businesses have an impact outside of what we actually do. And so we'll go on to that. So the core values of leadership, and I like to identify 3, and then you build on top of those. In the very first foundation, and there's a lot of construction going on in Toronto, and you can drive by and you can see the excavation where they're going down 30, 40, 50 feet into the bedrock to make sure they have a strong foundation of the building, especially in an earthquake zone. You need that strong foundation. And so think of these core values as that foundation that you build your leadership on. And that so when tough times get tough, that foundation is what guides you, that foundation is what holds you in place. I guess that's probably a little the engineer in me talking as I enjoy watching the construction and things being built. And so courage, why is that first? Well, first the definition, and then we'll get to the why is it first. Circle it that way. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's not the absence of fear. It's mastery of that fear. It's continuing on in spite of that fear. It's knowing there are risks involved in something, but regardless of those risks, you make the decision that the outcome is worth taking those risks to make that happen. So you see the quote from Mark Twain, and Nelson Mandela says the very same thing, right? Courage is not the absence of fear, but triumph over it. It's not that you don't feel afraid or that you're concerned about the risk or that you know the risk is out there, but you conquer that to be able to do what you need to do. And because whether we're in business or in life, there's risk to the things and the decisions we make. But courage is important because without courage, none of the other values work. None of the other values can stand without the foundation of courage. And so why is that important? You can see what Aristotle said. Courage is the first virtue that makes all the others possible. Again, I get the question when I talk about this is, well, why not integrity? Why not? We think integrity, that's our number one core value. Why isn't that important? Now, and my response is really, can you have integrity without courage? If someone comes to you with an issue that questions your integrity or wants to push on the limits of what you believe is right, how do you respond to that if you don't have the courage to say no? And so in order to have strong integrity, in order to be able to stand up to those challenges, you have to have courage. At the county, I worked for 5 elected officials. And they appointed me to run the county as a CEO. We call it a chief administrative officer or county administrator, but effectively CEO that you would think of in a board, a private business. And the thing about that was it only takes 3 to terminate you. So there's 5. If you make 3 unhappy, you're looking for work. So when I got there, I got invited to join a private organization that does a lot of fundraising, a lot of good things for the community. But their big fundraiser that they did every year was a wild game dinner where and it was male only. They excluded females from that. Now this is Florida. Almost half of my employees are female. My executive team, my key 7 leaders, 3 of them were female. And so you're asking me to be part of an organization that excludes almost half of my organization. No, I'm not okay with that. And so as part of that organization, though, 2 of my board members were part of that. And one of them came into my office, closed the door, which is always, a warning sign, and just really laid into me about why am I not willing to do that? How much money they raise is such a good thing. And I was like, that's all well and good, but if you're not going to allow one of my senior assistants who wants and needs the same networking opportunities as I do to attend this event, I'm not okay with that. And I'm not going to be a part of that organization. Needless to say, I walked away from that and said, I'm not going to do it, and stood by that. That individual is still not very happy. Thankfully, there was only 2, but this was an organization that the county sheriff was in. Many other elected officials were in that, and yet I basically said no. Now, the other thing I didn't do is, that was a private conversation. 98% of the people in the organization never knew it happened. But several of my key leaders knew it happened, and they knew I stood up for that principle. And so they first, right off the bat, had trust in my ability to stand when things were tough, when I got challenged. And we had the same issue in building permits, where somebody wanted to just kind of skirt the rules or not do what they were supposed to do to get building permits. And my building official said, no, you can't do that. Here's what you have to do. And so they would come to me and say, hey, no, you got to tell her to let us do this. So the answer is no, it's against the law. We do that, we violate the law. I'm at risk, my building officials at risk? We're not going to do that. And besides the fact, the code is there so that the buildings are safe for the people that are going to be in them. We're not going to let you do that because of the safety factor involved. It's a public health and safety issue. That it was challenges that happened routinely over the course of my time. The answer was always no. Now, let's follow the rules, do it the right way. But we could do that because we had courage to stand up for what we believed and what we thought was right. That's why that's so important. Because when that fails, when you don't stand for anything, anything's going to knock you down. So that's why courage is most important, and why I really want to push that home on that one. The next one is humility. And you may think to yourself, I don't see a whole lot of humility in, well, I will say the American political scene, the business leader scene. It's pretty narcissistic. And my response to that is, yes, it is. But that doesn't mean it's right. Humility from a leadership perspective means that you put others in front of yourself. That means that you think less of yourself. Or you don't think less of yourself, but you think of yourself less. You are looking to make sure that others are taken care of, and that when things are happening, that you're taking into account other people's perspective. And frankly, it's about making sure you share the credit with those, and then ultimately take the blame when things go wrong. I used to tell the team that any one of my 3,500 employees make a mistake, it's my fault. Anyone of them do something good, they get the credit. That's what we do as leaders. So when you have to be humble and realize that you have to ask questions and be that. When I was a brand new officer out of school, probably at the Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona, less than 60 days, brand new lieutenant, we had an airplane crash in one of our an Air Force airplane crashed in one of our ranges down south of Phoenix, Arizona. And so the commander called me, and I was a civil engineer, and part of the civil engineering job is to go pick up the pieces of the airplane, survey them so that the crash investigation team can then try to figure out what happened so that they can try to prevent those things in the future. And he said, okay, you're going to go down and lead the team. And I was standing there like, I don't have any clue what to do. He goes, okay, well, here, go meet the master sergeant. He's head of the crew. He knows what to do. Just, but you're the leader. You're the officer in charge. So I walked into the meeting room with the senior NCO, the master sergeant that I worked with, and at that point he was probably older. He probably had more experience in the Air Force than I had actually years on Earth. And I said, okay, I'm leading us down there. We're going down there. We got a team of about 15 airmen to do this. I said, what do we do? I have no idea what to do. I didn't say that, but I said, what do we do? And he said, okay, here, Lieutenant, here's what we need to do. Boom, boom, boom. He went down the list, and I said, okay, let's go. Let's execute it. I couldn't have asked that question if I didn't have the sense to be able to be humble and realize I didn't know, right? And so part of that is understanding that there are times where you don't know and you have to ask questions, and there are people that work for you that can answer those questions better than you can. So you got to be able to ask and be humble enough to come to them and say, hey, how do we do this? You're the expert. And again, I hope we all are hiring experts, right? We want to hire the best in the field. How do we do this? How do we make this happen? When I was running the county, we had 26 different distinct departments, different that had their own operation, from fire department, ambulances, to parks, to libraries, to social services for veterans and elderly and other things. And I would tell them in a meeting, I said, of the 26 departments, my resume, I would only qualify to run 6 of those. So the rest of you're the expert. So I'm going to ask you, now I'm going to ask you hard questions. I'm going to ask you to justify what you do. But at the end of the day, you're the expert. You need to make sure you can advise me on what we're doing. And so ultimately, humility is vitally important to running an organization, especially one that wants to advance and be really out there. So you got to trust your people to do that. You can see the data from Harvard Business Review. A lot of the research and data shows humility is more important than a lot of other qualities in being a CEO or a leader of a team, because it allows you to recognize your mistakes earlier on in the process and correct them. and allows people to come in and help you correct those things. So that's the second one. The third one and the final one is, I use kind of different words for this, but I'll say pick your word, what you think makes more sense to you, but compassion, care, or love for your people. I like love, but in the US and America, that word's been so misused over time, it doesn't really make sense to use in this context. But basically, the most important people in your organization, or the most important asset or thing in your organization, are the people who work in your organization. I would tell the team that we can't answer emergency calls without the people that answer the phones, and then direct the emergency responders to the right way. We can't make sure we supply clean water to the residents or the citizens without the people who do the work. And so they have to be the most important. So you have to care for them. You have to have compassion for what they're doing, and you have to treat them the way you want them to treat your best customers. Because if they do that, then they will understand and recognize the way the organization is treating them and will be better suited to serve the customer better. And again, as you see the quote from her at the bottom, he was the founder and CEO of Southwest Airlines for about 40 years in the US, one of the only airline until COVID that had never run an annual loss. Very successful airline in the US. And it starts with the employees and how they treat them, and then how the employees then treat the customers. Actually, one of my favorite airlines to fly on, but it's kind of a regional airline. So you have to take care of your people. They are the priority of the organization. So I always ask, how would your organization function without the people that show up to work? And I guess if you're a sole proprietor, then maybe that's you, or you taking care of yourself, because you're still the one that needs to be there, that needs to do the work. So how are you taking care of the people that show up? How are you caring for them? And that is more than just the 8 hours they're there, but of those that directly work for you, because you can't do this for everybody as the organization expands, but do you understand their family situation, things that are going on in their life? Because all of that shows up at work. They don't leave it at home. And so when they're going through a tough time or they have some issues at home, are you helping them for at least understanding that? Because you may see performance degradation. So how do you deal with that? You don't want to lose somebody good just because they're going through a rough time at home. So you need to understand that. The number one reason in the United States, and my guess would be most of the world, that people leave a company is their immediate supervisor and the way they're treated by their immediate supervisor. So if you want to hire good people and you want to keep them, treat them as if you value them, even after they are hired. So how does that build? And this will be the kind of the last point, and we'll get to some Q&A. So how does that build? Well, so you got to start with foundation of courage, right? And I'm thinking through the buildings that we see under construction here in Toronto and around the country. The foundation, the very basics, and then you build on that with humility and love that goes into that. And then this is where then we get into what's next. Well, in my mind, the next two are integrity and trust, because without those two, it's really, really hard to continue to operate a successful business. And I know that we've been here for going on 9 months, and I've been here before on short-term trips, and I understand that there's kind of I hear a lot of talk about the corruption and things that are going on, and I would say that, for example, I lived in the state of Alabama for years. While we lived there, the governor resigned due to ethics violations. The Speaker of the House, so the head of the legislature, was arrested and found guilty for ethics violations, ended up in jail. The utility board that provided water services in the community that I was in was under federal investigation for corruption. After I left, some of the very people that influenced the county commissioners of where I just worked ended up being under investigation and found guilty of some corruption is in Birmingham and Jefferson County. And so that's not unique to Albania. That exists throughout the world, but through that, you still have to have integrity. You still have to have courage to stand up for what you believe and do the right thing. And ultimately, I think that while there may be short-term losses and such, because of taking stands, ultimately you end up at the better for it when you do that right. So integrity and trust. I walked into the county day one and said, you don't know me, I don't know you, but the 50 key leaders that were in the room, the directors and assistant directors and my direct reports, I said, I'm gonna walk out of this room and I'll tell you, I'm gonna trust you right now. I trust that you're the expert, you're gonna do the right thing for me, and you're gonna give me the data I need to run the organization, but I'm gonna trust you to do your job. Because as a leader, trust is transactional, but you as a leader have to give it before your employees, your direct reports are willing to trust you. And that's vital to the organization. The next two really are just the things you need to think about as improving and being better at, because these are the critical pieces as we build on how to lead people in organizations, the things you want to look at. You have to be listening. You can't trust without being vulnerable, which takes courage. So again, you see how a lot of these things are circular and they go in process and they build on each one another. But as we develop an organization, if you build it on a foundation of courage, humble leadership, and then love and care and compassion for your people, you can build an organization that does what we did at the county, where we had the value of the work for the tax dollar paid for the citizens. We do an annual survey that jumped almost 20 points in the annual survey year over year when we started doing these things. We won the best places to work because the employees loved working there. It was easy to recruit to an organization because the best recruiters aren't the ones in human resources. They're the ones that are their friends and their family. And they say, hey, I work at a great place. We have a job I think you'd fit for, and they recruit for you. And so when you build on that, it becomes this thing that works, and you really, really get great performance. You have people that really love what they do and will do anything they do to make sure that the organization works and functions to do that. And so that's how we did that at the county. That's how I did that when I was in private business and running an engineering firm. The stories aren't as nice or cool as they are at the county or in the military. But in general, over my career, applying these principles over time and then learning and applying them, I've seen that, we've won awards. The engineering firm ended up dominating the market for what we did in the region we were working because of applying these principles. And so there is a really benefit to doing these. The Forbes 100 list of best places to work, there's a final comment. Annually, they put out best places to work, and the companies that end up that outperform their peers on return for investment to their shareholders, anywhere from 10 to 15% year over year, they have better return on investment for their shareholders. So profits, in other words, for their shareholders, than those that don't treat their employees well, those that don't end up on the list because they don't treat and do these things, follow a lot of these principles and the values of leadership. So with that, I'll wrap up and I'll put my contact information up there. I'm willing to talk more, whether if you want to contact me through WhatsApp or email or on LinkedIn. I can sit down and kind of talk you through these in one-on-one situations, or I do a lot of strategic planning, a lot of strategic thought. So somebody that if you're interested in those kinds of things, I can kind of sit down and bounce a lot of questions off of you. The skill there that I have is I may not know your business, but I know how to ask questions that get you to talk and think about your business. And so, and what you do. So with that, I'll turn it back over and thank you. And I appreciate the time.
Oh, wow. Dan, truly thank you. Let me just, again, I would encourage everyone that hopefully you've kept some notes and you're able to ask some questions. I'm going to do the warm-up with the questions, and I actually have several that I've written down. Miq, nëse keni pyetje, pra ju lutem mendojeni, mund t'i bëni edhe te chati, mund t'i bëni në shqip, në anglisht, si doni juve, mund t'i përkthej unë, dhe mund ta ndërmjetësoj këtë pjesë. So Dan, I was just encouraging everyone to ask questions even in Albanian if they want to, but I'm going to be the first one if that's okay. So I really appreciate you talking about those three core values of courage, humility, and compassion. And I kind of want to turn the spotlight a bit on myself. I try to lead a business and also work in an environment where I definitely want to have those types of values. And I can attest from my own experience that whenever I've had courage to stand for the values that I have, they may not have always worked to my benefit, but in the long run, they've really impacted my life positively, in the life of my clients as well. And they've been able to respect that much more. But as you said, courage and leading with courage by example. I kind of want to be the devil's advocate, if I may, in terms of saying, again, the reality in Albania is that if you are a leader, if you are it doesn't matter if you are in a top leadership position or just middle management or even just leading a small team, or even if you are just the palati administrator, you are the leader. And the model that we see is that that people can be courageous here, but they are courageous about the wrong things. So the challenge we have, and I think other people may want to, so how do we then, because we have this principle of courage, but people use that courage to be courageous about, I don't know, stealing, lying, cheating, defrauding, making things up, or not, or even not doing their job, and they're courageous. So I don't know if you maybe want to add anything to that as a cultural phenomenon.
Well,
I know it's a difficult question.
Well, and I will say that I kind of went through a short list. Those aren't unique to Albania. I know the culture is different. I recognize that, but a lot of the same issues exist, whether it's in the Balkans or Western Europe or in the US or in Asia. They just look a little different. But ultimately, it's because I want what's best for me, right? And so part of that is you got to really think, okay, what's really best for the organization? And most times what's best for the organization isn't necessarily what's best for the leader of the organization, right? And so you got to have the courage to do the things that are best for the organization and take, and I'll use another term, the long view, right? I'll go back to the state. In America, stockholders, they want to know what happened in Q1, what happened in quarter one, what were the profit and losses, what happened in Q2, what profit. I want my return now in the next 12 months. I don't want the long view, but you don't build a sustainable business on a short-term view. You build it on a long-term view. So where do I want to be? How do I get there? And yes, there's going to be detours and changes. We know it's not a straight line from point A to point B, but ultimately, I need to keep my eyes focused on the goal, that long-term goal, and have the courage to do the right thing for the organization, which may not be the right thing for me, for that long-term goal, right? And so that's when I spent probably the last 12 years working with politicians that only think about the next election. And that's not unique to any democracy, right? A lot of times they think about that next election, and so it's short-term view, and so we had to say, okay, how do we build that long-term view in an organization that has leadership that's focused on short-term, and we had to work with them to build that. So it's just it's a shift in paradigm. I will tell you, the the general leadership model in the US isn't the one I just described. That's the one I just described is not the common general leadership model.
Okay. Okay. I want to turn the spotlight on. So I see Dorian says, I have a question. Dorian, if you want to ask it via audio, so unmute your mic if you need.
Yes, you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. My question is regarding the situation now in Albania, or mostly in Tirana. As I perceive it is like this. When I meet two friends, one of them wants to leave Albania.
Mm-hmm.
The ages are from 20 up to 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I know that in the States you haven't had any of these problems before. You just get people inside, not leave. Except Canada, because you go to Canada to buy pharmaceutical stuff and you come back at least. But anyhow,
right.
In Albania, what is your advice on people that wants to leave? Not because they are good at it or they are very good and they don't find themselves here in Albania, but just this mentality that everybody wants to leave Albania for a better job. How can we keep people and hopefully next leaders to Albania?
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. You know, my first trip here was in 2018, and I started hearing about that then. In fact, one of the guys I met on that trip just a couple of years later won the lottery and ended up in Jacksonville, Florida. You know, and so I've seen a little of that. That's hard to answer because you live in a situation where you have three different generations that have three very distinct life experiences. You have those that grew up and worked under communism, the older generation. You have the middle generation that may have grown up under communism, but they were in their teen years or early 20s when communism fell. And then you have the group that they have no recollection of communism because they were born after it fell. And so I can't think of that's a really unique situation. And part of one of the legacies that left you with communism is what I see as a lot of just a pessimistic outlook here in Albania. And so I don't know how better to say. We fell in love with Albania when we came to Albania, which is one reason why we're here. And you may find that weird that we came from the States to come here, but we love it here. We love being able to do the things we can do here. And we love the people of Albania. And so I don't know if I have go to A, B, C, and D. I think ultimately between the business community and the government community leadership, you need to think about, okay, how do we best market Albania to Albanians, right? I mean, that's what you do with your employees. You want to keep your employees, you market the company to your employees while they're still working for you so they don't leave, because guess what the recruiter next door is trying to do, right? And so how do you market Albania to Albanians so that they stay and they can, and part of that may be, how do we improve, you know, our laws and things with respect to business development? I don't know. I have no idea what the answer is and what are all the issues there, but it may be, how do we as leaders market Albania to Albanians so they know how to stay and they can see a vision, future, and benefits to stay in here. I mean, you say that we don't have the problem in the States, but in the prominent States, we have towns turning into ghost towns because people are leaving. The small towns, they're going to the big city. Urbanization is happening everywhere in the world. And so we see that same kind of thing, is how do you keep the people in the area, or at least, because you still need people to manage the farms and the ranches and for those products that happen only in the rural environment. And so I don't think anyway, I could probably speak on this way longer, but I don't know if there's a really good do A, B, C, D, but I think really need to think about how do we market the benefits of Albania to the Albanians so that they stay and really fall. I mean, I can tell you love your country. You love who you are. It's a matter of how do we do that, how we clean up what everybody doesn't like. Yeah.
Just
That's
a
probably
follow-up, if I may,
that's probably
Elias.
that's probably a coffee. We need to have a coffee and have a whole long discussion about it.
Can I do a follow-up? Is
Yeah.
it okay?
Sure.
The next question is, at least for the future of leadership or employees, etc. Since this actual generation is leaving, let's say, and we don't really know how we can fix this problem, what about the new generation that is coming? In my perception, unfortunately, I am attending a bachelor degree, so I kind of have direct contact with this age. And they are so fragile, they are so lazy, I don't know, that's my perception. Like the new generation that is coming, they don't know how to work, they cannot do anything without an adult supervisor. They don't know what responsibility is. They see only short-term things like, let's study today for tomorrow exam and let's find shortcuts. Of course, even in our generation, this was happening, but not in this degree. So, I mean, for the next generation, do you have like a niche advice, or how can we deal with the new generation? That it's going to be our employees or hopefully our next leaders?
Yeah, I would say you just got to keep working, because that mentality generally changes when they realize that they're the ones that have to earn the money to provide for the family and do those things. You see that switch. I could have taken what you said and I would have heard the same thing out of people my age, of the younger generation in the States, or the generation that's in the middle of their working years and starting to lead businesses and governments always think the one that comes behind them is, what did y'all do? What have all you been up to? Right? It's been a consistent pattern. And so I think it's just keep on the pressure, keep it on, and you will see that change. I mean, there's a reason why, the kid that's at 16 and 18, when he goes away to school or to whatever, when they come back and actually get a real job, that they are a different individual than they were 5 and 10 years ago because of that, and because of that responsibility. You just got to continue to do it. I've heard that same discussion in the US. So that's not unique to the younger generation. The generations today, have gone through so much. When I was a kid, I was a remote control, and we had 3 TV channels, and if we didn't catch it on TV, we didn't see it. Right? And today, I think now I'm going to stream the whole season of something, over the next 12 hours. It's different. So.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dorian. Thank you for asking the question. Dan, I don't know if you have a bit more time. We have one other question from Ilir here. So it's also in the comments. I'm just going to read it, if that's okay. So we came out of communism, but communism has not come out of us. So we still lead with a strong hand. We want control. We don't like the different opinion. If someone thinks differently from the leader, he is often removed from the leadership team. I'm the leader. I make the decision is the position that most leaders take. So the question now is, how would you help Albanian leaders to change this control mentality? Thank you, Ilir. Thank you for asking the question.
Yeah, thanks. That's not easy, because you have to give up control. And it goes back to the values we talked about, right? Without the person I replaced, she had all this control. I mean, when I got there, if somebody in the county wanted voicemail, I had to approve it. And why would the CEO of a $2 billion operation have to approve somebody getting voicemail? Doesn't make any sense. And so we started shedding those things. So I think that there's a lot that goes into it. How do you build courage? Part of that is, okay, have you trained the people to be able to do the work, right? That's part of it. You can't just dump everything on people without training them to be able to do the work. almost gets back to, you almost have to do it one by one. You know, walk them down, coach them, train them. That if you want the best for the organization, you need people to be able to tell you, I think that's the wrong decision, right? I had a team of 7 that any one of them could walk in my office and close the door and say, Dan, we need to talk. And they all did from time to time, and would say, I don't think this is the right direction, or I think we're going down the wrong path with this, and here's why. And we'd have a conversation. And sometimes I'd say, nope, we can't change because this is why we're doing it, and walk through why. And they say, okay, well, I can see that. And or I'd be like, you know, you're right. That is wrong. Let's fix this. Right. A lot of things happened during COVID, right? And we were kind of flying, to use a euphemism, by the seat of our pants through a lot of it. I don't know if that makes any sense translated. But we went through it, and my libraries wanted to close to outside people, so that they wanted to close the libraries. And I said, no. And they said, well, Dan, we have a plan. I'm like, no, you can't do that. And my Kathy, who worked directly for me, who libraries works for her, said, Dan, at least listen to them. I mean, at least hear them out. They let them walk you through the plan, hear them out. And so I said, okay. So I'm telling you, it's no, because people still need the services that they provide. They need to be able to get books. They need to be able to do these things. And so she goes, so they did. We had a call much like this, and they walked me through their rationale and their reason. I asked a bunch of questions, but at the end of the hour, I was like, you have a plan. You can still deliver the services you're delivering today in that environment, and you have a way to work, and we have ways to get back out of that if it's not working, and you're going to test it. So, okay, go for it. And let's watch it and see what happens. And so they spent an hour and ultimately changed my mind. And so that gets back to those core values. I think a lot of it has to be built leader by leader, one by one, how you do that. And that just, people have to understand that you got to take a chance, got to take a risk. See people that are successful that do that, right? And so that's, you know, part of that's why I want to have conversations like this, and sit down and have coffee and talk through them and see how that works. So, but it's tough. You know, I was like, the leadership model I'm talking about is not the dominant leadership model in the US. It is not the dominant leadership model in the US, which is why it was easy for me to attract great people, because they loved what we were doing and they loved the way we were doing it. So,
Wow.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. I am thinking, since we're at the limit of our time, I mean, I had one other question, but I don't know if everybody wants to spend the time to, and Dan, I don't know if I can take another 3-4 minutes of your time, if possible.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, great. So let me ask you another question. And you mentioned the core values was compassion, care, and love for your people. And as a leader, I definitely want to abide by those principles and by those values in my day-to-day life. But I am, on a daily basis, I am also faced with the challenge of, how do I care for people who may not be as competent as I would want them to be?
Right.
Or how would I care, and how do I have compassion for people who, as a leader, they depend on me for everything they need to do? You mentioned the fact that, you know, you had to approve the voicemails, all that. So I'm trying to paint this picture of, how do I care for people that may not always be up to the standard that I would love for them to be?
Right. Well, I think that gets back to the situational leadership model, which I don't have in front of me, but, you know, every new employee, well, not everyone, because if you hire at the middle and upper levels, you're hiring somebody with experience and training, right, and knowledge. But the brand new employee that doesn't have that starts over here in this box, and you have to train them and develop them as they get through the box. And the more they learn, the better they get at it, the more you can delegate to them, the more you can trust them, right, to do the job. But you have to work them to that point because that brand new employee with 6 months experience is not going to behave and act and have the same. You can't delegate to that person the way you can the person that has 16 years experience, right? Good experience, not just where they didn't learn anything, but where they've learned and developed over time, right? And so you got to see, okay, where are they in this box? And then use, okay, based on where they are in the box, how much training and development do I need to give to them so I can get to where. We always want employees that are fire and forget, right? You give them the task and you don't ever have to worry about it getting done. You don't have to worry about it meeting the standards because it's a fire and forget. You give them the task and it's going to happen. I had my senior team, basically most of them got there. They weren't all there initially and I had to work on a little of it, but when they could get to where I could call them on the phone and say, hey, I need you to look into this. That was it. I didn't have to write it down, didn't have to document it. I knew it was going to happen. And they would come back on at the time they needed to say, okay, here's what happened, here's the deal, or whatever it was. But that takes training and development and working through and being okay with them making mistakes, because the best way to learn or to make mistakes, right? And so to do that. And so that's how you care and have compassion for them, is you train and develop them and spend the time and money. And yeah, you got, again, long picture. If you're just looking at 6 weeks from now, you usually don't do that. But if you're looking for, okay, how's this person I want this person to be with me for a long time. I want to take the long view on that. And that's how you do it. But yeah.
Oh, wow. So that was very helpful. Thank you. Helpful and very challenging at the same time, because it's a process.
Yes, it is.
Well, Dan, on behalf of everyone here tonight and on behalf of myself, I just want to thank you again so much for your time and really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Did everybody get Dan's contacts if you need them? If you don't, you can always write to me and I can forward them to you. And without further ado, then I will just close this session tonight, thanking everyone and wishing everyone a great night and a great end of the week as well, which is tomorrow. So, all right. Thank you. Have a great night, guys. Bye.